Hey all, welcome to Circle of Tone. And today we have the greatest intro riff from any band in metal ever. There's going to be very few arguments in the comments as to the greatest intro riff that a band has ever introduced. That straight off the bat, it just launches them into just riff history, right? March of the SOD from S.O.D, Stormtroopers of Death. And the Speak English or Die album. That's a great way to start. But I'll get into that later on, all the controversies about this. So, it's a perfect time to talk about albums like that, right? And then YouTube. Yeah. So anyway, let's just talk about why I think that this type of riff doesn't just involve the gear. Now I'm going to talk about the gear. I'm going to tell you exactly what they used. All right, let's talk about the gear that Scott Ian and Alex Pereira used to do March of the SOD. And he used two guitars on everything in the 80s, but on this one he used the Randy Rhoads, the Pearl White Concord, the first generation Floyd Rose that had the JP pickup in it. Back then the strings were usually 9 to 42 gauge, but he might have used different ones because he was drop D on SOD. But the amp was a 1979 Marshall JMP Super Louis 2203 JCM 800. These are Marshall names, man. But the producer Pereira still has that original 1979 JMP JCM 800 from back in the day, and I do not blame him. By far my favorite amp of all time. The cab he used to have these camo cabs, so they were loaded with Celestians G1280 80-watt Celestian speakers, and the pedal was his famous TC Electronics Booster Distortion, and he got that in 1982. And they also used that on the bass, and for the bass as well, they also used these huge acoustic solid state bass amps. But the mics that they used on the guitars were the SM57 and the MD421. And that went into a Neve console. It's not just a fucking amazing riff, the pacing of it, digging in, the bass going at the same time, it just comes straight into you, and then the really simple drum beat. Nothing fancy, even though Charlie is capable of that. Charlie usually underplays most of his stuff. He's very capable. You're going to see that with the Pantera reunion. And I want to get into the exactly why you can't just record something and be heavy. You actually have to live. You have to live and breathe it. Look at me chatting away. All right, I'm just going to do a voiceover for this because I tried to explain it. I tried to explain why just writing a good riff isn't good enough for the listening public, okay? Very rare a riff will just come out of nowhere and the public will eat it up. With SOD, the reputation grew until people realized it was heavy. Same thing happened with Guns N' Roses. Appetite for Destruction came out and nothing happened. As soon as people started finding out what crazy party animal, bohemian, oily night lizards that they all were, hard rocking, womanizing badasses, right? That's when Guns N' Roses went through the roof, when they had visual proof of how cool Guns N' Roses looked, and also stories in the press about them. And then Appetite for Destruction kicked off. So that is a huge part on why I can play this riff and, it sounds good, but it doesn't make people like grind their teeth and think that this is one of the best riffs of all time. All right? Attitude. Billy Milano, he had such a reputation for being an absolute hardcore punk madman in the pit. He was a bass player at the time. The attitude of the scene and the respect that the bass player, Danny Lilker, had, the respect that Scott Ian had from Anthrax, and him being known for being a riff lord at the time, it all comes together to create something better than the riff itself. People are emotional animals. The first bite is sometimes with music is with the eye or with the mind. That's why a lot of modern guitarists aren't connecting with people, because who are they? They are people like me, people like you. They're not Billy Milano, who's throwing 300-pound people into the mosh pit, all right? They're not like Guns N' Roses back in the day. People live vicariously through the music. It's almost like sex, drugs, and rock and roll for your mind, and first bite is often with the eye. So I tried to explain that, of why it wasn't just a riff. The crossover scene back in the day was part of the ethos behind SOD. Plus you had the crazy artwork, and you had the funny lyrics and the outrage. So it was shocking. The music was shocking for the time. So it all comes together to make the riff all that better. I hope that explains it, because that is what is missing in modern metal today. A little bit of good, violent, friendly fun. There's a hardcore crossover punk element to SOD. Billy Milano is so terrifying as a frontman. He's a bit of an intimidating guy. But we are talking about a man who is steeped in the hardcore scene. This is how far back he goes. Before he was in SOD, he was squatting in New York with the Cro-Mags before they became big. He saw the Beastie Boys. He saw them at CBGB's with a girl drummer back when they were a hardcore punk band. Yeah, that's how far back he goes into the scene. So he's lived it. So what you get with this band, with this riff, is Scott Ian from Anthrax, and he often does this. He often dabbles with rap, with hardcore crossover. When he's in Anthrax, he gets an itch. He wanted to do something that was more hardcore than Anthrax. So he just got the itch. And he went to CBGB's, and he almost got his ass kicked because he had long hair. Him and Danny were in CBGB's talking about it, rehearsing, and looking for somebody to front it. And it was Billy who actually saved Scott Ian from getting his ass kicked in CBGB's, because he was with a bunch of skinheads who were about to kick his ass because they had long hair. Back then, there were rules, all right? The skins and the punks didn't mix that well. The hardcore guys didn't mix that well. There was a lot of schisms before crossover like SOD. SOD has a huge, and Cro-Mags, people like that, when they went crossover, had a huge impact on the scene where there was less hate. There was a more cross-pollination going on between scenes because of albums like Speak English or Die. So you can't just come out with a riff in your bedroom, because people know, even when the listening public don't know. They know a riff when it's steeped in a certain attitude. They can tell the difference between me riffing over a fake drum to something like SOD, because it has just this swagger and essence of an underground riff. It's hard to explain, man. It's hard to explain. So it's like you almost got to pay your dues, and then you get the respect from the actual community. Because Billy was he was a bass player actually at the time. He's a well-known and hardcore punk guy back in the day. So he got so much of a family that supported him in that scene. And that crosses over to SOD, and honestly, Charlie and Scott Ian actually got lifted up, and they got a bit more rep because of that. It's hard to explain. I'm just trying to paint the picture for what the scene was back in the day. Like, I was thrash through and through, right? I could not go to the New York hardcore scene and crossover scene, right? And even pretend I was into the scene without being steeped in it. There's so much of a click. It's a kind of fucking ridiculous, you know? From the thrash aspect where you'd be ripping off like Cinderella patches or whatever, they took it to different levels. The reason why we didn't get a lot of SOD was because of how true Billy Milano is to the scene, all right? So we have now, he hates Scott Ian and Charlie because they wouldn't sign with the fans and the rest of it as much as he had wanted to. Because that is practically, the hardcore scene has a lot of family, with the fans and everything. It gets kind of ridiculous, to be honest, especially with the straight edge and that type of thing. When you get into all these little factions that get off, it gets pretty bananas. Scott and Charlie's name is mud now to Billy Milano, and they will hardly ever do any reunion gigs, I don't think. I think he may come out, if he gets that chip off his shoulder. Scott rubs him up the wrong way when it comes to being a little bit aloof. Charlie has always had that, reputation of being a bit aloof with the fans and that type of thing. I don't want my channel just to be about gear, right? I want people to realize the attitude is lore and reputation and almost like fairy tales. Like Metallica were alcoholic and party and skateboards and this and that and just fun, right? And that's what grabbed me when I was a kid. I wanted to live that. I was bombing down hills on skateboard with a backwards cap on and, fucking patches, all the rest of it, because I wanted to be part of that. Lore, it's not all about the music. A lot of it is about reputation. A lot of it is about being true, and being not opposing and the rest of it. So I want you to realize that your band might not be connecting with the public because they just see you as a copy and paste drone, copying Andy Sneap's microphone on a vintage 30 to a certain angle with a Friedman angle, and a boost. It's going to be a Tube Screamer style boost. So if you got 9 strings, it's going to be a different type of like a Horizon boost or whatever. You're doing all these rules. You're not being yourself, and people can smell inauthentic. They can smell it when it's not you. Your band can get good if you get a little bit of infamy. Like Billy Milano knocked out the singer from Nevermore over a girl. Just punched him, knocked him out, just flat over a table. I think he's attacked Kerry King. I've just did Slayer recently, and he's beat up, and Kerry King was like, I actually like S.O.D. I don't know why he attacked me. He was laughing about it. I'm not sure if he was serious that he attacked him, but Billy Milano was a savage because not only was he, just a nightmare in the pit, he was actually a bouncer in places like CBGB's and the old clubs that he used to frequent. There was quite a lot of hardcore clubs there. CBGB's, he said that he didn't feel like that was their club, because they only had that like for a few hours on a Sunday for the hardcore punk stuff. So he said, so there was other little hole in the wall places that he loved back in the day I wish I could have been a part of that scene, I was a part of the thrash scene in Swansea. I got about as, I opened for, my band was Season's End. We opened for the biggest thrash bands in the UK, Zentrix, for Skyclad, ex-Sabbath singer was in that. So I was in the scene, I was born in the darkness when it comes to thrash, for the British scene anyway. Sabbath are the best thrash band of all time, in my opinion, from the UK. Because my band blew Zentrix off the stage. It's a Metallica clone, No disrespect. It's kind of disrespect. I was just jealous. I thought my band was better than theirs and they were getting signed and I wasn't. Where was I? There's the attitude. A little bit of attitude, right? There's not enough assholes in rock and metal anymore. And Billy Milano was a fucking asshole. He's an asshole's asshole. And he just talks mad shit about Scott Ian. I don't think he talks shit about Danny, the bass player. But he just says that they're fake and the rest of it. And speaking of Scott Ian, and the album's called Speak English or Die, right? Racist this, racist that. This is Scott Ian, the same guy who is the pioneer of rap and metal. So working with Public Enemy. That's the racist one, right? So that's the racist album. Look. The SOD was so misogynist, and on the surface, you'd say "Speak English or Die" is racist, but it was just them pushing buttons, man. It was just dumb kids pushing buttons. They weren't racist. They weren't, like I've got a daughter, right? I've got the cutest daughter that in the world that's ever lived, and I am not mad at the massive push of it's gone way overboard with girl power and the rest of it, and I'm hoping the pendulum swings to somewhere by the time she's older. I hope the pendulum swims where it gets to a little bit of sanity, because it's gone a bit too far right now when it comes to misogyny on YouTube and the rest of it, where everyone's getting pushed that aren't necessarily talented, but it's because they're a female-fronted group or whatever. 5 out of 10 content, but because it's a girl band, it's getting pushed. I've done a video about that in the past, about how that's getting pushed in the Grammys and everything. And as a father of a girl, I'm not hating it, but I just want it to be the pendulum swims to just a little bit of sanity, where it's not condescending, giving gold stars for average talent. This is just because it's a controversial album with controversial subjects. Is that in rap? You know what I mean? Yeah. And in fact, it's expected. But now rock and metal people have to be these like bastions of purity. Why? It's fucking boring. So I like it that they have assholes talking about stupid shit. I mean, goddamn, we're only human, That's part of the reason why metal is so fucking boring right now. Is because it's so pious. Everybody who's getting pushed is just so positive and and nice and the rest of it. And life isn't nice. Life is gritty. A bit of realism sometimes is nice. So that's it. And thanks to my patrons of Tone. I have no sign-ups recently, but if you like these types of videos, please at least subscribe, hit like. What are your suggestions for famous tones, famous riffs, famous studio albums that you want me to recreate in the future? Let me know. We have a Facebook group if you like this type of thing. Just search Circle of Tone on Facebook. Come say hi. And that's it. It's good to be back, guys. And I'll see you next time, and here's some more riffs.